Hey everyone, in this video we're going to practice flams by running them through an eighth note 4-2-1. So let's drum through it first and then we'll talk about it. This is at 115. So as far as the rhythms and counting, this is going to be exactly the same as it was in the accented version of the eighth note 4-2-1. We just have flams here, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or with foot, and I'll play the second bar, foot and foot and foot and foot and. Eighth notes throughout the entire exercise. So let's talk about the flams because that's the only difference here between this and the accented version. If we play the first bar and take a look at what each one of our hands is doing independently, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So my right hand here is going to just be playing 1, 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like I frequently say at this speed, if I'm just playing quarter notes with one hand, I will stop the stick and pick it up again instead of rebounding it. And our left hand here, this one is almost going to be playing, you can think about it like it's playing eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, all as taps. It's not exactly that, and we'll talk about why later, but if you think about it like that, that will give you an idea of pretty much the speed that it needs to play. And like I said, all taps. So I would play these all at 3 inches. So together, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In the next bar, it's basically the same thing, just reversed. So your right hand, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and your left hand is going to be just playing upbeats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So together, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One of the main things I want to talk about in this exercise is when you go through this, you end up having back-to-back flams from your left to your right hand. So this is one that you're definitely going to want to practice off the left or starting the whole exercise in your left hand and playing everything basically backwards. And here's why. The first time we run into this is when we switch out of the 4 section and go into the 2 section. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So that and 1 is what I'm talking about here. So let's look at what our hands are doing. In the and 1, our left hand, it's a left to right flam. So our left hand is playing an accent and then a tap. Our right hand is doing the exact opposite. It's playing a tap to an accent. So this is more difficult for your right hand. Your right hand is playing what we would call an invert anytime you've got that tap and you have to pick your stick up quickly to play a higher note afterwards. We would say that is an invert on your right hand. So that's more difficult. So typically our right hand is our stronger hand in the first place, and then we're practicing something that's more difficult for our right hand. So it's just going to exaggerate the difference in our right hand is already a little bit better, and then we're practicing something more difficult on it. So make sure you, like I was saying, you practice this exercise off the left or starting with the left hand so that you get the opposite, the right to left inverts as well. So let's go back to the flams. In the beginning I said in this very first bar, you could think about your left hand as playing eighth notes, and that's how you should think about it. It's not exactly eighth notes though, because what happens is every other note is a grace note for the primary note. So for instance, if the first time you play it's a grace note for 1, it should happen before this primary note, so it should happen before 1. So they're not straight, perfect mathematical eighth notes. For instance, I'll put my right hand on my leg and you'll hear a little bit of unevenness here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the reason it sounds a little jumpy is because, like I was saying, every other note is going to happen, the first note's a little bit before 1, and then the second note on your left hand happens exactly on and then the third note is a little bit before 2, and then the fourth note is exactly on and. So that's why they're not exactly eighth notes, but if you think about them as eighth notes, you'll have an understanding of basically what your hand is doing, how quickly you need to play or how far apart those notes are, just with that tiny adjustment. Something else I want to talk about here is that I play my grace notes at my tap height. So 3 inches or whatever your tap height is, I would play them exactly the same. Some people have a lower grace note than that. So I've heard of some people saying that they use a 1 inch height for their grace note. And if you were to do that, you would end up kind of playing tiny bucks or tiny accent tap from a 1-inch grace note to a 3-inch primary tap note on the next, on the and. So for instance, you'd have 1 inch, 3 inches, 1 inch, 3 inches. I don't do that. I would play them all at 3. And here's a fun way you can practice this pretty simple exercise, make it a little bit more challenging, is play it, of course, at different speeds. So a lot of people would crank the met up and play it faster. I would maybe leave the met here and play it as triplets. So for instance, that'll also give you the rebound version versus the stopped downstroke version. So normally 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and at triplets you would have All right, let me know if you have any questions or want to see anything else, need help with anything. Otherwise, good luck, have fun, see you next time.